Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all here. Um, Excited to be on tonight. We have a returning guest. We're excited about Mark. I've known Mark for many years, um, and uh, and so he did a great job on his on the church collapse presentation we did. Actually, that was like 2 years ago now, because that was before I hurt my head. Um, so we're happy to have him back. Just a couple of things to remind you. You might have noticed that Jamie has shut all your microphones off. That doesn't mean you can't ask a question. That just means we don't want to pick up on any accidental conversations. We've had that problem in the past where people have talked and shown video and had their phone on, and we didn't want to hear or see anything that was going on. So we try to get ahead of that now. Um, so we're in the middle. So we started last month with the leadership series. We're going to be continuing that on. We'll talk more about that. We have guests booked all the way through March. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Um, but uh, a little while ago, Mark was kind enough to come to Gales Ferry and deliver a leadership class. And one of the highlights in that class was him talking about his library. Uh, and I'm one of them. I like to get books too, even though I don't think I read them as much as Mark does. So what I asked, we stopped by the firehouse a little while ago, and I said, "Hey, how about coming on to the show? Because we're going to be doing leadership. Let's talk about your library. Let's talk about the books that folks who want to learn this skill of leadership um, would know the resources to get." I I'm torn between the concept of born leaders and educated leaders, or folks that have been trained to be leaders. I think there are some people uh, they may not have a lot of book time, but they've got a good handle on it. I know other people that they've done a lot of research and a lot of books, and they keep on top of things. I can honestly say that I have not read a leadership book in a few years. Matter of fact, I started looking at reading one called Flashpoint by Frank just recently to try because we're going to have Frank on the show at some point in the future. Um, so so Mark, um, take it away.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. When Nick asked me to do this, one of the things that I did, I don't know, quite a few years ago now, in some of the classes that I've written, and I stole an idea from a class that I went to quite a long time ago, is um, at one of my last slides of the class is I put a slide up and it has pictures of various books on it. And all of the books that are on the picture, and I'll share my screen after if we can do that to show you the picture. But basically, I've gotten something out of every one of those books that I've read, and I do have a pretty extensive library at this point. They're not all leadership books that I have. I have a lot of books on Boston on Fire and FDNY and certainly textbooks and different things. But along the way, reading these books, one of the things that I started doing is I started just either folding the page over of a important point, or I actually started writing them down or like highlighting them in a book. Um, and then taking those points, putting them on paper, and every once in a while, I have a just a Word document on my computer, and I'll look at that file, and it'll kind of refresh my memory on some of the points from these books. Um, and I don't get to read as much as I'd like to at this point, but I get to read enough where it keeps me pretty fresh and updated. And certainly, I mean, there's new books, fire service books that are coming out, often and every year, and a lot of them either end up on like fire engineering's website or Amazon. You can buy a lot of them and stuff like that. Um, so Nick asked me to do this. I have a stack of books next to me. I'll kind of show you what that stack is right there. So I'm gonna go through most of them, pretty fast and just talk about some points and kind of, I guess, how they affected me leadership wise. Um, and a lot of them are pretty well known people in the fire service. Actually, one of them um, is Chief Ludwig. Chief Ludwig started in St. Louis, and recently he was called to testify as an expert
Mm.
witness in an unfortunate line of duty death. But I've read a lot of his books, and they're all really, really good. So I'll talk about one of those tonight. But if you want, Nick, I'll just get right into
Yeah, go for it.
the book part of it. All right. So first two books I'll talk about. So um, unfortunately, I lost my father about a little over a month ago now, and certainly had a huge impact in my life. And my dad was a Navy veteran. He was on submarines. The reason why I ended up here is because he got stationed in Groton. But one of the most impactful speeches that I've probably ever heard fire service wise was, if you don't know who Bobby Halton is, Bobby Halton was the editor in chief who unfortunately passed away uh, over a year ago now. Is it 2 years? Wow, 2 years already.
Mm.
But one of the first times that he made a presentation at FDIC, he made a presentation on the USS Indianapolis. So there's actually a memorial in Indianapolis that's not too far from where they have the FDIC of the Indianapolis. And one of the things that struck me with this book, I never knew this story. It's a phenomenal story, but during the presentation, Chief Halton talked all about this whole story and what happened and how the ship went down and all the sailors were in the water and they were being attacked by sharks and everything. And at the end of his presentation, you can find this on YouTube. I would highly recommend it. At the end of the presentation, he asked this gentleman to stand up, and the name of the gentleman was um, James O'Donnell. And James O'Donnell was one of the survivors of the Indianapolis, and he became a lieutenant in the Indianapolis Fire Department. I met him. He has since passed away. His grandson is actually on the job there now. But one of the lessons that I learned from this is what I would call perseverance and leadership. And it's not specifically a book about leadership, but when you talk about Navy, now you get into It's Your Ship, very famous book.
Mm.
And some of the some of the points of this from a leadership perspective, obey even when you disagree. Every so often, your chain of command comes up with a new policy, learn the background, enforce it, make objections known in private. And that's so important as an officer these days, I think, is that um, things come down. And what I've found in my career is that when I was a young dumb firefighter and something would come down, I wouldn't understand why. Always ask that question. And the higher up in the rank structure I've got, now I understand that sometimes come from completely out of an organization and into an organization, including policies and stuff. So, um, and even with the policies, even if they're standard operating procedures or standard operating guidelines, they provide guidance, but they're not an end-all cure-all. And we want people to make good decisions, and that's, I think, a leadership lesson that I would say, to officers. So those are my first two books.
Mark, if
The
I
next
could.
one,
Mark, if
yeah.
I could. So there's also so that this whole issue of perseverance. Oh man, I one of the things I do when I go to a swearing in is I walk up to the guy, I put my arm around him, and I go, or gal, and I go, it's going to be okay. There's going to be times it sucks. There's going to be times you're going, what did I just do? But in the end, it just do the right thing and do
Hmm.
your best, and and it'll work out. You may have boss that doesn't understand our business. has been elected or put in there to make dramatic cuts, try to right a ship that's not doesn't need to be righted. Just plug along many a time during the difficult times. I would say to the guys, we're going to do our jobs, and we're going to do our jobs to our best of our abilities, and watch. When we're doing our jobs and we're not fighting and being, being jerks, we're doing our jobs. We're going to respond back and say, well, this is we think is a better way, but just do your job. And
Mhm.
other people will see that maybe we're not the problem, right? The other thing is
Right.
it's your shit. There's also a sequel to that. There's also a second book that he did.
Yes. Hmm.
It's Our Ship or something like that. I can't remember.
I'm not sure the title, but I haven't read it yet, but I have seen it. Yes.
That's a good one. All right,
Yep.
thanks, Mark.
The next one, I think this one really helped me out a lot back in my early days when I first got promoted to lieutenant. You know, Chase Sargent was from Virginia Beach, and he coined the term "from buddy to boss," and he actually has two books out now. There's a second book. He's since retired, but a lot of the principles that are in here are really really good. And certainly, I think everybody would agree that if you're a firefighter one day and the next day you're an officer. That's challenging in itself, and it's certainly challenging when you have, some of your crew that's you're very good friends with, and now you are now their, potentially their leader or their supervisor. Um, this book really helps you out. I would highly recommend this book, especially to young officers. It's one of the books I talk about a lot in officer classes and stuff. And the other thing that the main point about this book that I really like is that there's a section in there that he defines he calls them players, different team players, and he actually names them A, B, C, D, and then F. And I've always said, we would all love to have the A team, right? Just like being on a football team, of course, we all want to win the Super Bowl, but not everybody does. Um, so of course you want all the stars, but sometimes as an officer, you learn and you perfect your craft by having what I would call challenges, challenging people sometimes and challenges. So A is the stars, B is the vast majority of the members, which are people that do well, they want to do well, they want to do great things within their areas of expertise and ability. C is the not bad employees, but they really are not that self-motivated, and they don't want to really do anything extra. D is the small percentage of members that are below average, and certainly that could be a challenge to an officer from a leadership perspective. And then the F players are not sure how they even got on the job. They inherited members that um, they never took the time to evaluate properly, and certainly motivation is a struggle. And one of the things that I talk about when I teach a lot is that um, I often start a discussion about, can we motivate people? And some people instantly raise their hand and say, yes, absolutely. And then other people say, no, we can't. And I've always said my philosophy, and it probably comes from this book, is that I think we can provide the arena, um, to get people involved and make it comfortable for them. But at the end of the day, not everybody's going to be on the A team, and that's something that as an officer I think is very, very important. He stresses a lot in this book. I'm a big person on values, core values. He has a lot of stuff in there, and a lot of stuff on decision making, which I find firefighters today, struggling with at times to making good, sound decisions. And whether or not it's because maybe they're not sure of themselves or whatever. But I think this book really does provide a lot of good insight on that. So, next one, I don't have it. I think I actually lent it out to somebody. I went to look for it for this show, but one of my favorite books, First In, Last Out by John Salka. First In, Last Out as a company officer. That simple statement really should hit home to a company officer. Never put somebody in a position that you wouldn't go yourself, and certainly leading from the front, and making sure that when when you're coming out of battle per se, you're coming out of a fire, that your crew's taken care of. You have a par, and they're coming out ahead of you, and you're the last one out, and you're there as their officer to make sure that they're coming out, and they're okay. I think that message in that book, and I could go on for statements a lot from that book, but that to me is one of the most important messages that he does in that book. Next one. I think you already had Dennis Rupin on, right? And
Yep, we
um,
had him on last month.
okay, so two great books. It's always about leadership and DC Fire. So
Yep.
um, I would give him accolades for both of these books. This one especially is going to get hit home for leaders, and I know I'm sure he probably talked about those. Um, the biggest thing, some simple messages. You got to show up. You got to be there. You got to have courage. I talk about that in the latest class that I been presenting. You got to have the courage to make tough decisions. And I tell people that sometimes that when you got to make tough decisions, go find a place to do it. You don't have to make it instantly a lot of times, but you want to make good decisions. And I think he really hits that point home. Some of the DC stories that he has in here for, I call them officer challenges. Wow, there's some pretty significant challenges that he's had, and stuff that I think most of us probably, hopefully, will never have. But certainly larger problem. You have larger problems sometimes, and I think that's what the key is in this book. Um, Another message that he talks about is tell the truth always, and as simple as that sounds,
Yeah.
I think I see people these days that are struggling. I've always told my own kids that, just be honest and you'll get punished a hell of a lot less than you will if you lie to me. And and I feel that way in the firehouse as well. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and I think it's important just to own them. Um, but anyway, those two books, great books.
And
The
for
net,
our get Mark for a second. So for our
yeah.
guests, if you go back to Spotify and you can look that up, Dennis Rubin was on last month. I actually told him to bring a bunch of books because we knew you were coming on. So we actually showed us five different books that he had come out with, and he's going to be
Mhm.
continuing to write. Dennis is a fixer. Dennis has been all
Yeah.
over the country, and what he does, he goes in for 6 months to a year. He's now he's in Kansas City, Kansas Fire Department, and they actually just he was there as a sub, as a temp, and they just said we want you to just stay. That's the way to do it. I want to talk about the courage under fire or the making a decision. Um, Folks, that have made very important decisions in their lives that have had a national impact. As there's times you just got to do that. My One of my mentors, Dan Keogh, he said we were a small operation. I was a brand new guy. I was going to be going out with a bunch of guys I didn't know because I'd only been there a short time. And he said, "Listen, just make a decision. If it could be a good decision, we like good decision. But if it's a bad decision, and we find out afterwards, then we're going to talk about it and we're going to learn from it. But you have to make a decision. Sometimes
Mhm.
you have to choose the best bad decision there is. There are times there are no winners, and we have the choice of four bad decisions or three bad decisions, and we have to pick the best one of those, even though it's not the home run. It's not what we want, but sometimes we have to cut our losses, and that's a very hard. People get in it jacked up, and their brains start running and worried about what's going to happen to them after they make the
Mhm.
decision. Well, decision's got to be made now. We can't wait for a reward afterwards because the situation's live right now. That's a great point, Mark.
I think there's just to expound upon that a little bit, you're right, there's decisions that need to be made right now, but then there's also decisions that can wait. And I think knowing the difference as an officer from leadership
Yep.
is important because um, you know, when I teach young officers, one of the things that I tell them is that we're programmed to take instant action because we have to, right? We go to a car accident, you go to a fire, you go to a call, and we got to take instant action. That's how we're trained to do. You can't wait. We can't take 5 minutes to make decisions. But the problem is that when it comes to the not so fun stuff, personnel issues, budgetary issues,
Oh yeah.
accidents, challenges, now now we're in the mindset of making that decision just as fast, and that's when you really got to slow it down. I don't have it in this program, but one of the things that I always teach, and I've had people that have laughed at it, and then they come back later and they're like, "Oh, you're absolutely right." My younger son works as an operator at Millstone, and even before he did that, I used the radiation acronym of time, distance, and shielding, and I apply that to some of these tough things, like some of the situations that Chief Rubin had. I'm sure he had to go, and do that and take the time, maybe leave, go to a coffee shop, go somewhere else, and then, make that decision. So it's important, I think, to know the difference, especially now these days with some of the challenges that are being presented, um,
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
officers. So.
Absolutely.
Next, two actually, they're really by the same people, but Um, Extreme Ownership, not a fire service book, but and then the Dictionary of Leadership. Both of these are by the Jocko Willink and Leah Babin, and I apologize to them if I pronounce their names wrong. But um, the biggest message of especially Extreme Ownership is that it all comes back to the leader, no matter what. And the leader is responsible for the team, and there's no I in team. And um, a thing that I always try to remember that I got really from this book is that never walk by a mistake, right? So you're on the fire ground, you see a kink, don't walk by it, take care of it. You're in the firehouse, somebody made a mess, they didn't clean it up. I'm not saying it's right, but don't walk by it and don't leave it for somebody else. That's not the right thing to do, in my opinion. Um, so I mean, in both of these books, they say no bad teams. There's only bad leaders. They purely put all of the emphasis on the leader. They compare the Navy SEALs, to a professional sports team, which I completely agree with. I say it all the time that most firefighters are football fans, we'll say. Maybe some are soccer fans, I don't know, but football fans, if the right tackle doesn't get his block and the running back gets, tackled in the backfield, you're not going to get any yardage. And the same thing goes on the fire ground. If we don't get the line in place in a reasonable amount of time, we don't get a water supply, we don't, things don't happen, in a relatively quickly amount of time, then things start to go wrong, and that's when we start to get in trouble. So I think you should read these books. They're really, really good, even though they're not fire service leadership per se, but they're very, very good. And they talk a lot about planning and advice, and certainly a lot of it is related to combat and missions and everything else. But that's kind of the way you have to look at some of our things that we do is although we're not under fire per se, we're in fire, which is at times extremely dangerous, as we know. Um, some things that they talk about in the books, some priorities. They talk about how they can shift rapidly and change rapidly. We need to be good at that as a leader. Um, and number one on their list is evaluate the highest priority problem. And I can say that's my life today as an officer, is that I feel like every day I'm triaging things. I come into work, there's four things I got to take care of. An hour later, something more severe happens, and I have to, switch everything around to take care of that. I think the fire ground is no different for young officers, today. We have to evaluate that, and we have to, make sure that we're ready for that. And that's, I think, something that's a challenge today is preparing our people for that. It certainly takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. Clear, simple, concise terms. Develop and determine a solution. We just talked about that. Direct the execution of that solution. Move on to the next highest priority problem, repeat it. When priorities shift within, the team, pass situational awareness both up and down the chain. And that's one thing that I would tell anyone these days also that I certainly got from this book is that I don't assume anybody can read my mind. I don't assume that they're on the same page unless we have a conversation because I think that that's a bad idea is that when we assume that everyone understands what tactics that we want or strategy we want, we don't communicate that. I think that's kind of a recipe for disaster. Um, Lastly, for the dichotomy of leadership, a leader must be confident but not cocky, courageous but not foolhardy, quiet but not silent, a leader and follower, humble not passive, and strong but have endurance. And last message that I'll talk about, a leader should have three things. They should trust you, you should have value, and they should seek your opinion and guidance. And they give you what you need to accomplish your mission and then let you go execute that
Mm.
mission as a leader. We all hate the word micromanager. Absolutely, certainly in the fire service, that unfortunately happens. And trust is a hard thing. And I think that, you know, the extreme ownership book especially talks a lot about that. And sometimes it's simple, right? Sometimes somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, this piece of equipment is broken," and you take their word for it and you move on. And other times, you might not have that level of trust and, you have to make a decision as an officer and, just be careful with that. That's a fragile thing. It's a tough thing. And I think a lot of that comes back to the word expectations, which certainly is communicated in these books.
I think the command, I think having that trust issue with the overly confident is a something that needs to be you have to really look at, right? Before you're going to have that amount of trust is, and everybody has a different view on that. But there's some people I say do this, and I had no concerns. Other people, I check up on them a little bit more than I probably need to, until I was comfortable. And again, it's all about that comfort level. I mean,
Mhm.
there's guys you can say get this line to the third floor, and you don't have to think about it again. Other folks, that might not be the same case, right? I
Right.
agree. Building that trust is just it's so important.
hmm Um, Next one, five alarm leadership, Salsa and John Salka and Rick Lasky. Um, they've been presenting all over the country for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Um, both of them are, I would say, famous in the fire service. Um, for different reasons, right? One comes from, Texas, one comes from New York. They both have different ideas, but they're certainly leaders in presenting various things. Um, one one point from this book that I took away, and it has a lot of good stuff, a lot of similar stuff to some of the other books, is that none of it matters if they don't respect you and you don't have integrity. And I think that's extremely important these days. Is that word integrity and the word trust that I
Absolutely.
talked about. This particular book is obviously it's geared more for you know chief officer level. But if you haven't heard of Chief Lasky before, he is the one who really conquered the term pride and ownership and came out with a program. There's another book for that. There's another video for that, and that really all ties into this whole book. But those are the big points that I took from this book. Um, but very, very good book. This one is a pretty small book. Um, no exceptions leadership. It's by a chief Hovelman, which if you look up on the circuit, I had never
Yeah.
heard him talk before or whatever, but the book actually has it has 100 suggestions in it. They're all each page is a suggestion, and to be honest with you, I probably wrote down I don't know 15 things out of the book. Um, I'm a huge person on expectations. I feel like if you don't communicate your expectations, how can you hold people accountable? And his first point in this book is having high obtainable expectations. And for me, it's um, if you only have three, that's fine. Basic expectations. Do your best, do what's right. Try to make the department this much bigger before you go home. I mean, basic expectations, treat the public with respect, all that kind of stuff. But this he talks about that a lot in this book. Um, Leadership, he defines leadership, and there's certainly more definitions of leadership out there, but having the ability to get others to do things that they do not do on their own.
Right.
And that's a good definition. I like that definition because I talked about the motivation earlier in the arena part of it, and I really believe that. And that really goes back to, for me, for being a company officer and doing company level training. Not everybody's going to be, really happy about that, right? But you have to get through that, figure it out, and do it the best you can. And then sometimes, as an officer, you get some satisfaction when somebody comes up to you and say, "Hey, you know that was a really good thing. I really learned something good today." And I think that's what the goal certainly should be. Um, a team that doesn't know what's expected of them will not have confidence in their role. Again, expectations. Talks a lot about influence in the book. I talk, influence and power,
Mm.
and how they coincide and how to get things done. And I've always said being fair and consistent, and that's in this book. And also, one of his points in this book is one of my favorite statements these days, and it's just be nice. Just be nice, because
Telling you.
as an officer, you can get so much more done by just treating people with respect. You're gonna have bad days. You're an officer. You're gonna have bad days. You're gonna have situations. You're gonna have people and situations and politics and all that stuff that are gonna try your patience. But at the end of the day, I think that's very important. With that, he says, Don't ever apologize for doing the right things for the right reasons," and
Mm.
I really believe that as well. So, good book, like I said, about 100 things. He does talk in here about trust as well. So, some common themes start to, the more you read, the more, you get like me and you go, oh, all right, that's
Yeah.
that, I heard this in
Heard that
another
too.
book already, right?
So I would agree 110% with the respect thing. Even a even a problem child or a person that complains about everything, blah 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 blah. If you may need to correct them, you may need to inform them, but if you have respect and you do it respectfully, they when they have their complaints, they'll be respectful back to you. And that way no one's getting begrudged, no one's getting yelled at, none of that. It's a there's listen, one of my captains said there's two kinds of ice cream, vanilla and chocolate. Some people like vanilla, some people like chocolate. So you just have to deal with it. You just have to figure it out. But if you do it respectfully, I agree, Mark, 110%. If you do it respectfully, you'd be surprised. I know some people that could tell somebody they were full of it. They would be so respectful that the other person would accept that and say, "All right, well, this is what and then they would be respectful back with their counter discussions." So,
Mhm.
absolutely, great choice.
Just related to that too is I really, I guess this applies to my personal life as well, but um, I really am at the point now where I would tell, especially young officers, you got to pick your battles, and sometimes you got to be good at timing, because
Well, timing's everything.
yeah, it's not that you're letting something go, it's not that you're not going to say anything or whatever, but there's a time and a place, and the old adage of discipline in private and praise in public should be part of an officer's vocabulary, in my opinion. But this is hard stuff. This is not the on the scene stuff. Usually, it's the behind the scenes stuff
No, this is where
that's a
everything gets
challenging.
everything gets all
Yeah.
messy. If you've ever
Yep.
had to deal with teenagers, there's a time to react instinctively or strongly, and there's a time to we need to talk about this when we get home. Just,
Hmm.
you know, where are you? What's the situation? Is it life critical? Is it life safety critical? Or is it just
Right.
a different opinion?
Right. Yep.
Absolutely.
Um. So Chief Ludwig, um, very very good book. fully involved leadership. So I started reading his stuff in magazines quite a while ago, and he started his career in St. Louis. And if you if you read his books from St. Louis, there's some pretty cool stories. Some of the stories that you may not ever experience in your career, I would say, some definitely some challenging ones. They the thing I liked about his original books is that I could feel the struggle, right? I could empathize with that because I could feel that early on in my career as well, with some of the struggles. And I mean, if you look at where we were back then, early in my career to where we are now, I think we certainly have come a long way with training, equipment, stuff. Not perfect, not going to be perfect, but certainly we've come a long way. And I think that that's one of the things that really turned me on to his books was reading that. So when he came out with this book, he talked about a lot of things, and one of the things that he talked about relating to people and firefighters is that they don't leave companies, they leave their company officers, and that's goes hand in hand with what I believe. I believe company officers probably have the most influence in their people, and if you again, be fair and consistent and have expectations, communicate them, um, constantly have discussions, coaching, mentoring, all of that stuff. I think that's important. And he also talks in there about there's some people that he worked for that were challenging, and he learned a lot from those people. And I would say I totally agree with that. I certainly had some of those in my in my early days as well. Um, but I often said that sometimes you could learn just as much from the tough ones as you can from the not so tough ones or whatever. I mean, I think you can learn from everybody. Somebody's got something to offer, and certainly have some information for you. He talks a lot about trust as well, and you know his attitude in this book, I think, is that um, if you're stagnant and not learning anything, it's probably time to retire. And I believe that. I think there's so much stuff these days to learn every day, procedures, equipment, you know, tactics, whatever it is. I mean, there's so many different things to learn. Um, he talks a lot about that. He also talks about never force a devoted, loyal, and exceptional firefighter to the point where they don't care anymore. And I think if there's a struggle I hear today a lot in classes is that, and whether it's just burnout or uh, I don't know, I think there's just some people that just may never be happy. I don't know, but then there's a couple that they get they get the they eat a sour candy and they're a little sour, and I think that that's where company officers especially come into play, and you got to be able to recognize that today, and you got to be able to work on turning that around because none of our organizations today really can lose quality people, as far as I'm concerned. So um, last part of this book I think is that keeping your emotions in check is an important part of leadership. Boy, do I agree with that, and that's so hard sometimes. uh,
It's get that short Italian fuse. It can be difficult.
well, yeah, yeah. I'm not Italian, but I've certainly witnessed that plenty of time, and I get it. I understand the frustration sometimes. I understand how people can get negative. I think for me, I look at it that um, at this point in my life, I feel it's a choice, and I think that me and myself, I could come into work every day and be miserable if I wanted to. Certainly, I could do that, but it's a choice. I don't want to do that, and I think you have some control over that. There's always going to be challenges, no matter where you are. There's budgetary challenges, there's staffing challenges, there's equipment challenges, there's maintenance. All of these challenges, you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, sometimes it's completely exhausting, but I think this book gives you an insight from a chief officer's perspective, especially of trying to get you to overcome that, I guess. So that's a good one.
I think there's people that say, "Oh, if I only worked here, if I only worked there." Go walk in another man's shoes or lady's shoes and see what they go through. There's some stuff, right? There's some stuff they go through, their hours, the number. I mean, I know there are, I know there are departments in this region, their ambulance goes out 20 times a day. That's something you got to get used to. That's something that you have to prepare for. And where other people get upset when they go to the local convalescent home 3 times a week. And it's like, there's always things. There's good and bad, and wherever you're going. We have this
Yes.
conversation with teenagers, with high schoolers, right?
Hmm.
You want to get a good job. You want to go out there. Look at it. Talk to people that know about that situation. That wherever you want to go, because there's going to be something you're not going to like.
Right.
I cannot give enough credit to the Navy firefighters at the submarine base in London and up at New York. Newark. Yeah, guess what? You're coming into work and you're not going to get paid.
Hmm.
And we don't know when you're going to get paid.
Right.
You still got to come do your job. You still got to check stuff. You still got to do this. You still got to do
Hmm.
that. I mean, and credit to those guys. They dug in. They all showed up. They all showed up every day for their shifts. There was no big sick walkout, nothing like that. And there's ups and downs in every job. And there's
Hmm.
something that would have blindsided me because I would have never thought of that, you know?
Well, and I think that's where a lot of these books for me come into play because they give you the tools to overcome some of those obstacles.
Hmm,
That
absolutely.
scenario was kind of similar to what we went through, I don't know, 12 years ago now with the layoffs, and
Yeah,
that that damaged the department for a very long time. We still have some after effects from that, even though a lot of the people that are on the job now weren't here then, but still, it's how do you overcome stuff like that? And how do who do you call, right? That's another thing of the leadership aspects, I think, is that you got to have a playbook and you got to have probably a list of a couple individuals that you really trust that probably are outside of your organization to be able to call and say, hey, have you ever had this situation and how am I going to, handle this or what advice do you have? The sub base, we actually went to out to coffee with him, I don't know, about a week and a half ago and talked to him just about that kind of stuff. And we just went back and forth for a while. And obviously we're not in that scenario. Um, but just to let him know, hey, everyone around here is supporting you. We understand, we get it. It's not your fault. There's nothing we can do, unfortunately, but we're here to support you. And I think the other point of that is that when it comes to these issues in the fire departments, people these days are quick to throw grenades, and especially on social media. And I think it's sad because until you walk in somebody's shoes, you talk about your high schoolers that you don't really understand. If you take a fire chief these days and they're under orders to make a very difficult decision, and then they're taking fire and taking grenades for it. I don't think a lot of people understand all the aspects of what
right,
goes into those decisions sometimes, and it's hard because if you're not in that position, I talk about it in officer classes. Like if you've never been a parent, like you really don't understand what it's like to be a parent. And the
right,
same thing goes with being an officer. If you're never an officer and you're just throwing grenades over the fence at the officer, officers are human too, by the way. We make plenty of mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my career. Um, as a company officer, chief officer, we all make mistakes. I think learning from those mistakes is what's important. And with that, in a couple of these books, admitting that you made a mistake
oh
that's
yeah.
a tough one for people, but it's so necessary. I
Well,
think because
I'm
you
sorry,
know,
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say we all make mistakes. Everybody does, you
I
know.
think that saying that you made a mistake goes a long way for legitimacy and respect because no one's
Mhm.
perfect. Uh, and there was a couple times I we did stuff and the unknown to me, we had violated the contract because I was new. Hey, I screwed up. Okay, I got it. This is what the solution's going to be, and you move on. Um, I think a lot of kids, not well, I sometimes new well sometimes new officers come on and they've got a lot of great ideas and a lot of great motivation to go that way. And the problem is the road's not paved for them to go that way yet. And we got to do some work to get the road ready for them. I
Yeah.
I made a list of 20 objectives that I wanted to do in 1997. And when I left in 2018, they were still half of that list had not been achieved. And they weren't
Hmm.
brain surgery, they weren't building a spaceship. But they just were not meant to be, no matter what how much work you put into it. Sometimes that happens. And I think as a new officer, you have to understand that. You can be really motivated. Let's say you're a rescue-minded guy or gal, and you're all about the rescue and getting this vortex and that thing and this everything else, and it's like we got to have one right now. Well, okay, but I also have to have turnout gear. I also have to have this, have to have that, right? So sometimes being able to listen as a new officer or a chief or in whatever direction we're coming and having the other person listen and understand, ask questions so you have a good idea what's going on. When it's all said and done, you may still not agree, but both sides have an idea of all the entanglements, all these little things on the side that you don't know about, and
I think,
sometimes you can't talk about
yeah, and I definitely think budgeting comes to mind, right? And
it. Yeah,
I would tell anybody these days, and again, as a young firefighter, I didn't understand. I thought I did. I didn't understand. You know, now I completely understand. You gotta, we'll call it a pot. You got a pot of money, and you got all these things you got to pay for, and like I said, you gotta prioritize things, and sometimes you got to wait longer, and sometimes you got to make sure that you get over these couple things before you go to that thing, and um, I refer to that now as a process. I tell most people that will listen or they come in about things, and I want to buy things like everybody else do. I want to move the department forward. I want to, training wise, all of those things. But at the end of the day, for me, most things are a process these days.
Mm.
Um, one of my latest examples, I'll share. This doesn't really have to do with leadership too much, but this is what's going on today, and this is how it's affecting things. So we had ladder testing about 3 weeks ago now, and we had a roof ladder, an 18-foot roof ladder fail. Okay, not unusual, but the first request of quote that I get, the price on it for shipping is $650, and I can't get the ladder for at least 6 months. The second quote, the shipping is $1,250, and I can't get the ladder for 18 months. Um, Now I'm back to it's a process, right? So this is what you're dealing with today. And in the meantime, you have people, where's this ladder? Why don't we have this ladder replaced?
Right. We need
Well,
this letter now.
this is the reason why. It is a process. And, if you digest those costs that I just told you, I'm not going to give you all the costs, but it's a lot of money these days
Right.
for these kind of things, so that if that has an impact on a budgetary item or stuff. So sometimes obviously ladders we're gonna purchase and we're gonna replace and all that stuff, but that's a priority. But there are some things that come across that may not be a priority, and they may be on somebody's agenda that we want to that wants to get a project accomplished, but it might take a little time to do that. So
And
for
size
sure.
and size matters. So I mean, there's a flashlight. You want to get everybody the latest LED flashlight for their jacket. Okay. And then in the city that was 20. What do you got? 70? How many what are you up to? 60, 70 guys?
Well, on the line 64,
And then you got to
40,
give them to the
64
inspectors.
plus, yeah. So
chiefs,
we're at about 70 total.
right?
Yeah.
So it's still there's still the with size comes cost, comes
Mhm.
budgeting. Same thing with even with the small, but you might find that a small department doesn't have can't even find the money for flashlights. Never mind
Right.
a big place. I mean, we're kind of getting off, but something's got to give.
Yeah.
If the federal government says from now on you're going to do this, right?
Hmm.
Whatever it is, and that goes across the board, paid, career, volunteer, whatever you want to call it. The evolution is you got to figure that out. And a lot of it could mean could be saving up for something that you have prioritized, and suddenly, there's another physical, or there's another this, or there's another fit
Hmm.
test, or there's another whatever that's outside the control of the people that thought they had control,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. All right, next one. John Norman, Working with Giants. Um, we had John Norman back in the day come do a seminar in New London.
Yeah,
Fantastic guy, stellar career. Um, there, the funniest title of a chapter in here is "When You've Got a Great Act, Take It to Broadway," and I laugh at that because um, yeah, we have a lot of scenarios going in the firehouse that um, are very small leadership lessons, but they're so valuable that we could take them to Broadway, and that's the only reason why I took that statement out of there. But there's a lot of really good information in here. There's a lot of personal stories in here. And obviously the book, because he was well involved with 9/11 after and the recovery and everything. So the last
yeah,
part
we
of
read
it,
that.
um, you know, talks a lot about that. The next one I have, and I know you're going to have him on, so I won't talk a lot about it, but this is a pretty new book now. Frankly, Cornerstones of
We
Leadership.
we actually
Um,
had him on last season,
okay.
but yeah, but
So, um, a lot of it, what that book talks about is about attitude, and that's one thing that I say that as a new young firefighter that comes through our doors today, if they've got the right attitude, we can work with that. We can teach them what we need to teach them. We can make sure that they get the tools that they need, and some of it's on them, obviously, but certainly, I think that's one of the biggest messages in that book. And certainly the other message that I got out of that book is team and the team concept and the strength of the team. And an individual firefighter has to be part of a team for the organization to be successful. So, um, lastly, with that, he talks about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I I smile about things today because one of the things that I've seen, and I'm sure you have as well, is that if you're in the fire service long enough, the things that went out come back in. Booster lines is that example. For me, booster lines went completely extinct, and then now here we are. They're back.
okay,
So
back in trucks, right?
um, yeah, so there are things he talks about that a lot in the book. Um, Next one is a smaller book. It's called No Nonsense Leadership. It's by Jared Sergey. Um, he has in it. He has a couple things that I got out of this book. One of them is he has four simple pillars of success that should capture the lion's share of your personal success. And again, these have to do really with expectations as well. And certainly as a leader, be ready, look professional, act professional, take care of each other. And I think those are very valuable these days. Um, Being ready, I've always been of the opinion as an officer that I would much rather have positive discipline rather than be involved in negative discipline. The positive discipline is just that being ready, having your gear ready to go, having your radio charged, your flashlight, your air packs ready to go, all of those kind of basic things that we kind of instill in new firefighters when they come through our doors. Um, but those are some basic expectations. And, you know, part of that, I this was part of my speeches to people over the years is that um, if you look at our organizations, when a new firefighter walks into, we'll say Gales Ferry, a new firefighter walks into Gales Ferry, everybody's watching that firefighter, right? They're watching to see what they're made of. They're watching to see what they say, what they do, how they act, how they talk. Do they not talk? I mean, what are their actions? So what's happening in that process is that people are judging that person. Now, who are we to judge other people, right? Um,
In the
excuse me.
firehouse?
Yeah. So one of his messages is to not prejudge. Don't prejudge. And I'll tell you, and this has been a lot over my career. You know, you get some intel from the outside. Oh, you guys hired so and so, and that this person's this and this person's that, and they're awful, and then they come through your doors, and they turn out to be a great asset to your organization.
Yep.
So you got to be really, really careful of that. And I've seen that happen a lot in my career of people having a preset notion based on a rumor or something, and then
Yep.
that individual comes to your organization, they turn out to be a really good egg. Last message from that book is to pick your battles, which I completely agree with, and I've said it already. Um, On Fire by Mike Ciampo. Um, Mike recently retired from FDNY, I believe, right before FDIC this year. He is the one that writes the back page of the fire engineering book currently. He's a well-known speaker. This book actually is all of the back page articles that he's done up until it was published. So he's had more since then. But um, I have about 15 things written down here that he put in those um, and a lot of them have to do with strategy and tactics. So they're really good stuff. One of them, life fire operations priorities in that order. First in officers make a rapid size up and utilize these three. I always teach, what have I got? Where's it going? When I need to control it, that's mine. But don't use the tick as your only source of direction. I see that all the time with
Mm.
use the cannon short blast to control the fire during search. That's some good tactical advice. Use the battery operated sawzalls to cut the metal in old walls, referred to as one of the greatest gifts of all. Sawzalls got used a lot last night at Foxwoods,
Mm.
and they certainly are, a great tool. They've been around for a while now, but we've come a long ways with those. Making sure you have your SCBA on, even for food on the stove calls, and that's
Oh yeah.
sounds so simple, but man, I've seen some people take a feed with food on the stove calls, and you don't get that out of your throat for hours later. And for what? You got air. It's free. Use it. Um, Actions speak louder than words. Doing things without anyone telling you to do them. Create impromptu drills and training to keep skills sharp. Know everyone's capabilities, and doing things without anyone telling you, taking
That's
initiative. I think
that's so
that's
important.
it really is so important these days, and that's where our leading by example, I think, really comes into play. Um,
I got
on
to
the
tell
job.
you, Mark, with volunteers with military bearing, or even new employees that have a military bearing,
Hmm.
they don't walk by garbage on the floor. They 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 look up and the hose is something's just not right to them. They're gonna go ask somebody, is that supposed to be like that? Or you know what I mean? They just have
Right.
that bearing to, we got to make sure we're 100% ready to go every day.
Hmm. All right. I'm getting towards the end of my pile. I got a couple more, but Danny Sheridan wrote this book, and this book is Fire Service Discipline. So
Yep.
pretty good leadership. One of the uh, one of the points that he makes in this book that I like is called the five P's. Proper planning prevents poor performance. So think about a company officer. You're going to do a drill, and if you're good and you're comfortable and all that stuff, you can probably do them on impromptu and go over stuff. I always teach the instructor adage of, I do, we do, you do. And I think one of the takeaways that I've preached probably for the last 10 years or so is that when you're going to do especially company level training, um, I got to the point I didn't even call it training anymore because, and I didn't tell people about it ahead of time because if I told them about it ahead of time, they'd be booking off. So, sometimes, sometimes, you know, you can get them, caught off guard and say, "Hey, come on out here, let's go over this," and you go over that, and the next thing you know, you go through, you do it, you do it together, and then you stand back and you watch them, and then what tends to happen, which is kind of a reward to the officer from a leadership side, is that now you get to watch them take it a next step further, and maybe they want more, and they have a thirst of knowledge, and then they start asking questions, and you know. The past 2 weeks in Atlanta, we've had some outside companies come in. We've had lifting and moving was last week with Paul Debart. I don't know if you know
Yep.
Paul, but
Yep. Very good.
they did a great class. This week we have Flash Fire. They're doing a we've
Doing
had
a
to
bailout.
address no, we've actually had to address cars in the buildings and shoring and stuff like that. So they have a prop to do that now, and it's so nice to stand there and watch and see them getting into it and asking questions, and even sometimes the people that are unsure maybe of their skills or whatever, to see them actually involved in it is really really cool. So
It,
those are things I think again proper planning makes them successful. Go ahead.
I love it when the senior man steps up and he sees a junior person having problems, or they're just not, they got the right idea but they just don't have the finesse yet because they're new, and the senior man steps up before you can even say anything, and they say, here, just move this, like that,
Yeah.
and they'll make sure they can do it correctly, right? That's so rewarding to have, to know that you've passed down that we got to do it right, we got to do it right 100% of the time. We can't be to quote a friend of ours, we're gonna train till we're not gonna train till we can just learn how to do it. We're gonna train till we can not do it wrong, right?
Right.
We can. That's where the senior man can be just a huge help.
One of the challenges I hear all over the place these days has to do with mechanical ability, and
Yep.
I think this is Mark's personal opinion, but we've kind of really gone back to the basics, and we got to make sure as an organization we know the basics really well, and then we can expand upon a couple of specialties. But we're having to spend time on things that you know 25 years ago you didn't have to spend time on basic tools,
Yep.
basic mechanics,
Yep.
how to work different things, how to hook things up, how to troubleshoot things. I mean, I could go on all day about this topic. I talk about it in officer classes a lot that, um, you know, we've lost a lot of that senior, you know, people in a lot of departments. I was, in a department not too long ago, very similar to mine. And, I was teaching for about an hour and I listened to them, and then they came up to me at the break and were telling me the same stuff that, that is very familiar these days to other departments. And so you got to spend the time on this. Um, the recruit class at the Fire Academy, I do the Courage to Be Safe program now for the recruits. And in the recruit class a few weeks ago, I went and made the presentation, and about halfway through the class, I said, "All right, I got a question for everybody." I said, "Be honest, how many of you in here have ever really had any exposure to tools and mechanical type things?" Um, about two-thirds raised their hand, so a third of the class has never had their hands
Mm.
on tools. So my advice to them was, listen, this weekend, instead of going out and partying, go to Home Depot or Lowe's, go to a hardware store, wherever, walk around, ask questions, see how basic tools work, see what their names are, see all that stuff. And that way, it'll prepare you for being better at the job. But that's the basic stuff we have to go back to these days to make sure that we're proficient. Because if you look at the fire service, it's 95+% mechanical based. Everything that we do, car accidents, flooded oil burners, water leaks, fire alarm, whatever it is, it's
Yeah.
mechanical based.
No,
So,
I agree. We have people don't even, in some cases, if they've been, I don't want to use the word sheltered. If they haven't had the right exposure, you can go ask them to go get something out of a toolbox and they won't know what it is. I mean, people make fun of us when we take the tools. I mean, a toolbox, like screwdrivers.
mhm.
Uh, Pass me the star. What? Pass me the pointy
Right.
thing. Now I'm feeling stupid because I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? The X. Pass me the driver with the X on it. The Phillips? I don't know the pointy thing. Okay. So it's
Yeah.
like if I ever ask you for, I mean, we used to bust them like the left-handed wire, but stuff like that. But there's a now on the other hand, to be honest with you, if I was sitting at my laptop and they said just hit control, blah, 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 I'd be like, what? Because
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to that level, right?
Right.
But no, the where do we put it in? How do we pull it? Where do we pry it from? How do we? I mean, I've watched some at the fire school. I've watched some pretty unique ways to change air bottles.
Hmm.
All right, can they get it done rapidly? And let's show them that we're going to show them the right way and see if they can catch on to that. But you'd be surprised some of the end up because they haven't been trained, haven't been told how to do it. They'll figure it out. It's going to be ugly. It's
Yeah.
not going to be efficient. That's the problem, right?
Right.
And I'm not picking this. Listen, I was one of those guys, and Bob Halligan and Dan Keogh spent a lot of time with me teaching me different mechanical stuff before I got to work on the rescue truck. So I'm there. I was there. But yeah,
Hmm.
it just seems the bigger issue, you know.
Yep. It is. And again, I think it goes back to these days, it goes back to, a company level officer and again, that word assumption, you got to wipe that out off your vocabulary and you got to spend
Oh
time
yeah.
on these basic things that, they're going to mean something. And don't take that for granted, And I got to the point where I didn't even ask people anymore if they want to go over something. I just did it. And then, because if you ask them, they all say they're okay, right? They're, oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
all set.
Right.
Are you really? I mean, so, I think you're better off these days to present it,
I
and you
think
talk about
oh,
senior people, there's organizations, including my own, that has highly proficient people that are well beyond my capability of, things like carpentry and all that stuff. So, figure those people out and have them do a training on basic stuff and, and how to do that. I think that's what we need to get back to, again, being really good at the basics and then take on the specialties, maybe a couple, but it's tough to as an organization to only focus on the specialty stuff and forget about all the basic stuff.
and one of the things I did wrong, and I realize in hindsight, is trying to get involved in too many things. Um, whether trying to lead on, let's say, special ops and building collapse or trench or whatever, and trying to worry about all those special things when I only had four people on duty. So we had to then, so we invited our partners in, but still, the call volume it was just not there. And in hindsight, I realize that now. But back then
Mhm.
I had a different motivation. The motivation was to make the city something, give the city an operation that they could do to help other departments, right? Um, but in the
Right.
long run of all the maintenance and all the costs and everything, it probably wasn't a great idea.
All right, couple more. This one, it's not so much a ton of leadership stuff in it, but it's something that I believe in is, and I tell this to my oldest son is a firefighter in Hamden, and I tell him this all the time. Every time we talk on the phone, at least a couple times a week, I'll tell him like just have fun and have a sense of humor, be able to laugh at yourself. Um, and again, you're going to have challenges. No matter where you are, you're going to have challenges, whatever the challenges are. A lot of, larger departments now are having a lot of apparatus issues, right? We talked about the roof ladder. I gave you that example, but, you know, it's taking a couple of years to get apparatus, and if an engine blows or something like that, it takes a long time. Now people are frustrated because they got a reserve rig or junk rig or whatever. Um, this is have a sense of humor and just have fun, um, and have a good attitude about it. You know, uh, I can't stress that enough. Leadership is training, and training is leadership. That's a message in this book. So this gentleman was from Richmond, and it's actually Richmond, California. But really good. You talk about seniority in the firehouse and old school and stuff like that. This book has it. It's not something that would be on your leadership radar, but really good book. I enjoyed it. The last one on my official like leadership list. So I'm I'm an FDNY fan, have been for a long time. I know where I work is not going to be FDNY, however, but there's a lot of things to learn. So this book, most of you probably have never seen it. Um, this book is about uh, a company called the Rand Corporation.
Yep.
And that probably doesn't ring a bell for anybody, but if you go back to the war years when the Bronx is burning and Brooklyn's burning down and all of this stuff, um, New York hired this company out of California to run all these statistics and formulas and data, and they started closing companies based on the data. And then by the time that was stopped and figured out, a lot of buildings' lives have been lost, and certainly companies have been lost. This is interesting from a leadership perspective because put yourself in the shoes of a, you know, high level chief getting this data and making decisions based on that.
Mm.
So, although it's not a leadership perspective, type book, I think it provides some very valuable high level lessons of, you know, making some decisions that had some huge, impacts. And, this was in a day that computer are were not like they are now, but the data was there and they made decisions based on data. It had to do, run times and all of those things are inside of that book. So um, interesting read, put it that way. All right. The two sets of books highly recommend. By one person that we've talked about tonight, Frank Lieb, and the other one, uh, Billy Goldfeder.
Pass it on,
There's
baby.
there's two books here. There's a third one out now, I believe. It's
Yep.
Passing on Three, but these are all individual stories of different officers of different departments throughout the country, and some really good stuff. The other one that's relatively new, I haven't even finished reading it yet, but it's 30 Fires You Must Know. It's by the Billy Goldfeder again and Frank Lieb, and these are famous fires, and some of them are ones I've never heard of, and I think
Yeah.
I'm pretty knowledgeable on a lot of them. So, and they all have lessons with them. Um, some are close to us, some are farther away, but some are tragic, some are not. But there's certainly a lot of leadership lessons, I think, in those books. So that's
If
about all
I
I
if
got for.
if I could, my Mark, those
Yeah.
last three that Mark showed you, the part of the proceeds of those books, those authors did not take a dime. Um, and so it goes to Tunnel of Towers. It goes to I think the cancer, and I think there's a third. There's a third nonprofit. Oh,
Hmm.
who's the rescue battalion, the rescue chief in New York, who died in 9/11, actually predicted that the tower could fall
Downey,
down.
Ray Downey.
Ray Downey.
Ray Downey?
Yep.
Yes.
So there's he's got a foundation. So there's three groups. Oh, and fallen firefighters. So
Hmm.
somewhere's in there, there's three or four nonprofits that take the the um, authors'
Hmm.
benefits and they pass them around. Yep. The Ronnie Canchman used to say all the time that only Billy G could get 17 guys to write a book uh, for him, and he's got his picture on the front of it. Now he writes intros to all the he does an intro to all those people. He handpicked those folks to
Hmm.
contribute. There's some big names in those books in the pass it ons.
Hmm. Um, Lastly, I guess, and kind of related to leadership, but not so much fire service leadership. First of all, I'll share this with anybody. I'll give you my email address at the end. I'll be happy to send you. These are just the notes that I talked about tonight. Has the names of the books. I'll be happy to take a picture of my library, send you that too. If there's any books that we didn't go over that are like firefighter books, I have ton of New York books. There's an author named John Finucane from the Warriors. Excellent books. There's three. Uh, Riding the Backstep is the name of the books. These are a series of three. I have a bunch of books. Harrisburg, the Boston on Fire books.
Mm.
Other books too. If you're interested in EMS, one of the ones that I really found uh, kind of cool because it kind of really hit home for me. There's a guy by the name of Michael Morse. He retired from Providence. His first book was called Rescuing Providence. And
Yeah.
if you're on an ambulance in an inner city and you read the book, you're going to be like, wow, that sounds very familiar. Um, Providence is an hour away from us, but
It's a different world.
it's pretty similar. Um, Other books, Gutter Medicine. Gary Ludwig, actually, Chief Ludwig has several EMS type books, operational books. And again, if anybody's interested, I'll be happy to send you a picture of the books that I have with that, and have at it. I mean, there's a lot, and I certainly, like I said, for me personally, it's helped me out um, over the years to try to get an idea on some things and figure things out. And for me, it's you hear the message enough or you read it enough, then it really sinks in, and sometimes you can gain some valuable insight from that. So
Do you want to take a couple minutes and talk about the court proceedings and the report that Gary wrote for that fatality? Are you up to speed on that? I'm not 100% up to speed on it.
I skimmed it. Um, I was surprised actually that they had him be the expert witness because I don't know how far because both the fire was in Illinois and that's where he is now. And I'm surprised that they would have someone that close do that as a fire chief. But the report basically pings mostly the incident command and the strategy and tactics. The firefighter that died ended up they were kind of in an overhaul type mode. He fell on the floor and became trapped, and then succumbed to his injuries. Um, so a lot of the things that they got pinged on and the recommendations were NFPA standards that were quoted that they didn't follow. Um, and it started from start to finish.
Yeah,
Uh,
accountability, the I
yeah,
guess he went through the floor into the basement, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, there's a lot of in his report. Essentially, they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that, they shouldn't have done this. This is what happened. It's their fault. So the settlement, I believe, was $30 million,
31
$31.5
point
million
something.
dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um, it's so hard, I think, because I haven't watched the video. I don't know that much more information other than what I read in the report. Um, I think it's tough because you know I had a conversation last night about this in that I know there are people out there, there are incident commanders out there that you know do things differently than others. Some incident commanders are happy being in a stationary position at a vehicle down the road from an incident. Others want to be in front of the incident. Some want to be in a vehicle. You know, I mean, there are different philosophies to that, and certainly we can watch videos all day long of different philosophies, I guess. That was one of the areas that was critical in the report is that um, the command setup and things that got missed and that his in his opinion you can't effectively run a fire scene um by not being in a stationary position, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I'm not even going to throw anything at that because I wasn't there. And you just don't know what other factors are going on. I think it's easy to throw grenades at that, but until you actually do it and you're out standing in front of a building on fire or some kind of significant incident and you're dealing with all of these things, I can only again speak for myself that I want to have a picture. I want to have that mental picture. Not that I have to be there every second, but I want to know, you know, kind of where we're at and where it's going, and are we making progress or are we not? We had a fire on Pleasant Street about 2 years ago now. And I called a Mayday as the incident commander because accidentally we had a guy on a ladder, second floor window on the ladder, and you know he was getting hit with a master stream on the ladder. So had I been in a car down the street, I'm not going to see that, And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but and certainly we have to rely on other officers and training and all of that stuff. But when you're in charge of the whole thing, these are all things that you gotta, you know, think about, and you gotta be the one to answer for them. So whatever you're gonna, whatever's gonna work for you, and you're gonna be comfortable with, I think that's what you're gonna go with. But it's not always, everybody thinks it's all always so easy, but it's really not easy, you know.
I think the one of the things that and again, I didn't read the whole report. I only hit the bullets. Was one of the ones that's might happen to be my pet peeve is the accountability and knowing where your people are. And again, it's easy to say that. It's a lot more exciting to do that and really
Yeah,
know where people are. Um, you know, we just bought a whole lot of command board. Matter of fact, you used yours at the church. We bought a lot of these command um, centers, portable command centers. Um, I think it's important that we get everybody using those, right, and understanding those, and then trying to get a good handle on accountability. That just happens to be my thing, my pet peeve. Is there's sometimes we have people just I've been to fires where mutual aid we were mutual aid and mutual aid chief had to go into the fire and start shagging people out. There were so many firefighters in one bedroom that they were it was like a bell going off. They just kept bouncing into each other with their bottles. And it was like they couldn't function, so but nobody knew there wasn't a lot of control, so nobody was aware that many people were focused in that one spot when there was other things to happen. That's I haven't read the report. And I always thought Gary was EMS guy. That kind of caught me off guard. But